welcome to another episode of Making Disciples. In this episode today, I'm going to be interviewing the theologian Stephen Backhouse, who's the director of theology at 10 Theology. We're going to be exploring conspiracy theories and truth and wisdom, and how do we discern wisely the things that we are hearing, either in the newspapers, in the news, in the media. And it seems to me at this time, it has been possible for many sane people to consume some very insane stuff. And we as Christians need to be really good at being able to wisely listen to different voices and discern what is actually the truth. And Stephen just helps us think through a little bit about how we can do that. We've been prime during the corona lockdown, as we've been isolated, to actually not be surrounded by a community to speak into our lives. And sometimes that isolation has bred a space where fake news or things that are just not true or truthful to have taken root in our thinking. And so that's what we're going to be exploring today. Now, Stephen, he is a theological lecturer and teacher. He's been a guest lecturer for the Institute of Religion, Peace and Justice. He's been the Dean of Theology in the local church at the Westminster Theological Centre. He has taught at St. Mellitus, lots of places. He's a very gifted communicator, so I was desperate to see what he had to say on this particular topic. So friends, I hope you find this helpful. It's a slightly longer episode than usual, but quite important one for us to explore together. Conspiracy theories, fake news, and how do we as Christians engage with these things? Stephen Backhouse, welcome back to Making Disciples. I'm so pleased we can spend a little bit of time together, particularly today, talking about conspiracy theories and a biblical response to fake news. How have you coped with lockdown? We're kind of now in September. How have you found the last 6 months?
It's been a roller coaster. I feel like I myself have had some times where I actually felt what I would call an anxiety attack, or maybe even a panic attack, where I was really feeling constriction in my chest and my heart was pounding and I had to just press pause on everything and go for a long walk. You know, I live out in the countryside, so I was fortunate. I was able to walk up to the top of a hill. I actually sought out some professional counseling to help me deal with. So I definitely felt some anxiety in it, and I realized that it wasn't so much for my personal safety. It was more that I was absorbing the anxiety that was swirling around out there. I just everybody I talked to, everything I read on the internet or was always about doom and horrors and fear. And a lot of it was real. Like, it wasn't like it was fake fear. It was kind of like, no, this is actually, you know, the businesses really are shut down, and people I know really are getting a mysterious illness, and it wasn't a fake thing. It was a real thing. And then watching different groups that I'm associated with, I watch people almost like in real time lose their tiny minds, and you could watch people kind of go insane. You know, stuck in their homes, and just so I just felt a lot of kind of anxiety swirling around. So that's been part of my story. And then the other part is that I've actually appreciated the big pause button that was pressed on the world, and I have to say I've actually not hated the fact that my busy life was just stopped overnight, and that I was forced to sit in my backyard and look at my apple tree. And I was forced to just be still and not spend lots of money every day on coffees. And, you know, there was part of me that thought, okay, I'm not earning any money, and that's an anxiety, but I'm also not caught in the hamster wheel running around and around and around and going nowhere. And that's also a very interesting thing to be.
Yeah, and this feeling that, and it wasn't just you that felt that, and I think I love what you just said. My anxiety wasn't in my worry about Corona. My anxiety over the last 6 months has purely come from what I've been reading and seeing online.
Yeah.
People's Facebook feeds, YouTube videos. And YouTube is I love YouTube during lockdown. There's things I found that I'd never found before and absolutely adore. Found some new YouTubers that I'd never watched. And then there's other stuff that was more fear-mongering.
Yeah.
This is what I'd love to talk about, because our anxieties in the last 6 months seem to have opened some people up to greater worries. And the phrase that we would use for some of this stuff is paranoia, some of it is conspiracy theories, some of it is fake news. Yeah. And roughly what I'd love to talk to you today about is around how do we discern as Christians wisely what is godly and good and wholesome and true. But I'd love to just have this conversation around conspiracies. And we have seen our Facebook feeds full of things that some of them are very gentle conspiracies, some are great conspiracies. How have you found it the last 6 months around some of that stuff?
So on a personal note, over lockdown, I'm a traveling theologian. So most of my work involves traveling to churches to speak in churches. So obviously during lockdown, that just fell off completely. Like I lost all of my income generation, just stopped, right? Except one little job. And I was working as a kind of a consultant for a company. And it wasn't a Christian organization, but there were Christians who were running it. And they had hired me to be like their theological consultant to help them think Christianly about the business they were doing. And this was the only source of income I had. And the head of this organization, she got totally swept up in conspiracy theories. Bill Gates invented coronavirus in order to shame Donald Trump, and he's part of a baby-eating elite. Just all of that stuff. 5G is the cause of coronavirus symptoms, and it's all a conspiracy to control our minds. And so my boss, my only source of income, that was all she talked about. And she would have morning meetings, staff meetings on Zoom, and she would just talk at us for an hour every morning about these things. And I had to quit. So and precisely for that reason, I just said, look, my job is to be a counselor to you and a theological insight into what you're doing. And what you're doing is completely insane and anti-Christ. And I can't do this anymore. I can't do the job you're paying me to do. And I quit. So from a personal point of view, I've actually been affected. And, we can talk about what happened later as a result of that. But so there's a personal thing. But then I've also noticed, just all my friends or acquaintances, really, just the Facebook stuff and just the ramping up of these kind of theories and fearful ecosystems of information that are just being swirled around and people just living inside a little bubble. People I used to respect fully going for it and having to just essentially cut them out of my life. Like, not in a kind of a negative, hateful way, but just in no, you can't speak into my life right now. I've got real things to worry about. I can't be also engaging with this kind of punching at shadows, tilting at windmills kind of thing. So yeah, that means not reading Facebook, maybe not unfriending, but just unfollowing people. It does mean that. So it has affected my personal relationships and my income.
Yeah. And conspiracy theorists, people who believe some of this stuff, all walks of life, why is it, do you think, some Christians have really been caught up with some of this? What you've just been describing, the QAnon phenomena. Yeah. Being Christians, being swept up by this, it does fall within a Christian framework of this understanding of Satan and sin, and out there is an evil presence that is at work. So some of this stuff falls within a Christian framework. But why is it you think Christians do get caught up and start believing some of this stuff?
Well, all right. So I think some Christians are primed for it. They're ready to go. So they're set up for this. So it isn't that if you believe in Satan, you absolutely will believe in a conspiracy theory. Let's be sort of clear. There's alternative realities or alternative facts, and which you could maybe refer to as like an information ecosystem. So if you think about all the information you read, the voices that you trust, the data that you allow into your life, and then the implications you make of that. That would be an ecosystem. So like, what social media are you listening to? What newspapers do you think are trustworthy? What television news do you follow? That would be what we call an ecosystem. And what we've found over the years is that Christians now, especially, I'm not trying to be anti-American here. I'm not like just making some sort of racist point, but it's definitely part of the American evangelical and charismatic culture that we're seeing coming into the UK and other places, which is that the American Christian world is very isolated and fear-based. They're very individualistic in the sense that the world is out to get us. The liberals hate us. The world hates you. And I grew up as a North American fundamental or conservative evangelical. Like, I grew up in a school system which taught me that we were going to get raptured, like sucked out of the sky, that taught me 6-day creation, that taught me that liberals were evil, right? So I was part of a world that I grew up with this stuff, right? And a lot of the same voices that you're seeing now in America that are very, very loudly pro-conspiracy theory or pro-Donald Trump and anti-Democrats and anti-liberals, those are the same voices that I was grown up with, right? And if that culture is very much about, we need to create an alternative culture because the secular culture hates us. And that's where you got a really high culture of like, we have our own musicians, we have our own TV stations, we have our own printing presses, we have our own school system. And that would be they created an information ecosystem, spectacularly successful. You can be a mega celebrity with thousands and thousands of people cheering for you in the stadium. And you can buy private jets, right? And never leave the Christian information ecosystem. So in a way, the vehicle or the structure was set up. It was ready to go. So Christians coming out of America are ready to go, to have all their information produced, consumed, and transmitted without ever being challenged, without ever having to touch any other worldviews. Okay, so that's partly what we're seeing, and it is very successful, and we're seeing the products of it. And I'm an observer of this culture. This is what I do as an academic and as a teacher. I'm an observer of American evangelicals, and I watched it happen. Is that during coronavirus, because we knew that the spread of it, right? We knew that it, started in China, and then we started to see it like Italy. If you remember, Italy was the first major Western country to have it, and then it would sort of move, and then the UK got it, right, and Spain. When it wasn't until it hit North America or America, that was when we saw an absolute the conspiracy theories took off. The conspiracy theories were not happening amongst my Christian friends in Europe and in the UK. And it wasn't until it reached American evangelicals that this took off. And I saw that as, this is what I could predict was going to happen, right? Is that the alternative information system kicked in. And there was a very high distrust of science, very high distrust of authorities, a high distrust of universities. There's an anti-intellectualism or an alternative intellectualism. So they don't trust any intellectual or scientific advice that doesn't come from within that subculture. And, you could see it happening. And so I think this is, in some ways, this culture was ready to go. And then it exported. Those conspiracy theories were incubated within the evangelical world, and then they spread back to Europe. And I could observe that happening. It was almost like you could put pins on a map and you could see it happening, like you were tracking the spread of a virus, ironically. So that was happening. And then all the voices that were being spoken of, it doesn't take, all these voices that are speaking these conspiracy theories, doesn't take much to link it back to American charismatics or American evangelicals. So that would be one thing. But then you get so that's alternative facts, but then you get conspiracy theories, which is related but slightly different, because the conspiracy theory is that there are a group of people who are running the show. So an alternative fact just says, oh, we just don't believe your experts, we believe our experts. But the conspiracy comes in when you say, and there is a group of elites who are deliberately running the world, or they deliberately designed this, or they're deliberately hiding facts from you. And that's when we get into conspiracies. And I think, again, the Christians are primed for that, because they certainly, if you're coming from the more conservative end, or certainly the American end, you're primed for thinking of things like the Antichrist or Satan or the beast. And there's a whole generations of Christians who have been brought up expecting and waiting for some evil mastermind who's going to pull all the strings and press all the buttons, and so it's not that hard for them to then find that. Yeah. But we've seen it all the time. It's, there's always been, in the culture I grew up in, the Antichrist was a supercomputer that was in Belgium. Then it was Pierre Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, because his license plate had 666. It's been Saddam Hussein. It's been the Pope. The Antichrist has been a lot of different people even in my lifetime, and I'm only 44, and I can rattle off about 5 Antichrists, right? So it's always something, and it's never really the case. So I'm aware that this is what happens.
You didn't even mention Obama.
Obama's the Antichrist. Yeah. So it's always some leader that evangelicals don't like. Right. That's basically it. It's just always, if the evangelical American culture doesn't like it, then that becomes the Antichrist. So, and you just see it happening now. It's just happening again. So in some ways it's more of the same. It's just because of social media and lockdown, it's just like a little hothouse. So it's like we've added to our conspiracy theories that we've always had. We've now added growth hormones.
And one of the things that I noticed was a number of folk around me who really thought this was the end of the world. The kind of phrases that they were using was, this is kind of the end of the world kind of stuff. Jesus is returning soon. And I said, well, unfortunately, this may well be the end of the world, but I think it's more like it's the end of your world, because this is the first large traumatic event that you've had in your life. Yeah. Having been somebody that's visited Africa, I went to the Ebola treatment center and saw the effects of Ebola. Having been to Lebanon and visited the refugee camps from those from Syria in Lebanon, having seen what a lot of people have to live with on a day-to-day level, it is not the end of the world.
No, wearing a bit of cloth on your face when you go to Tesco's is not the end of the world. No.
Yeah. But for some of us who've never experienced anything, it feels like the end of the world. And I think for me, I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've had to travel and see things and experience things. Certainly when I went to Liberia and visited the Ebola treatment centers, how do you even articulate some of the what they went through was atrocious. There's no words to express how disturbing Ebola was. What we've gone through, for some of us, has been a mild irritation. Now, we've had a few people of our church that did have corona, were in hospital, and actually were very, very, very poorly. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of that stuff was hidden. People didn't see what was happening in the hospitals. So I even hear people say now, was corona even real? Was it a hoax? Mm-hmm. So what I'd love to just ask you is, how does the Bible help us with this? And how do we as Christians discern wisely how we respond to those who have these interesting worldviews?
Well, I want to say there is a difference between being intelligent and being educated. So we live in a world which sometimes we hear, if somebody says you aren't educated, that's like me insulting you. But that's not true. So I think a lot of our conspiracy theories, like let's take the flat earth one, for example. I see this as an example of an intelligent person who is uneducated. So they're almost too intelligent. They're almost too good at making connections. Human beings make connections between disparate information points. That's what we do. We're storytelling creatures. We tell stories. We're given a load of random data and we tell stories out of it. We make something of it. And what you see with a lot of these conspiracy theories is that it's almost like people are too good at making connections, but they're untrained. So I was thinking about this a little bit like if you saw, let's say you saw a young girl and she was really good at like kicking a football. You'd be like, wow, you've got natural talent. You're really good. So what we want to do is we want to get you in a program to teach you how to play football, right? So we want to harness that talent. We want to help you discipline it. We want to help you train it. We want to help you know what to do. So you're not just kicking a ball against a wall. You're actually part of a team. You have a purpose. You know how to pace yourself, right? So this is what I think when it comes with intellect and education, that there's a lot of people with kind of wild natural talent, but that's not the same as being channeled into how to discern good from bad data, how to tell good from bad stories, how to judge the quality of your sources, how to assess agendas and what that might look like, that there might be agendas behind some of the data coming. And somebody like me who spent, some time being educated, that doesn't mean I'm more intelligent than others. It means that I have made it one of my life's work to look at the assessment of information. That's what I do. Just like plumber has made it his life work to figure out how water flows well through a house, or a vicar has made it her life's work how to run a church well without people fighting each other. I could never be a plumber. I could never be a vicar, but I can help people assess data. Right. So, I do see a lot of that. And I think the thing with the Bible and with Christianity is that we live in a world which we kind of assume that because we all have a Bible for our own, that we're all equally valid at reading it. So we assume that you don't need an education to read this Bible. All you need is your own opinion, and that you could draw all the connections yourself. And that if you draw connections, if you just randomly open the book of Revelation and find something about the beast, and then you randomly open a newspaper and you see something about Bill Gates, that you've now made a connection, and your connection is equally as valid as somebody like me who has literally spent 2 decades learning this stuff. This is partly where this is coming from. It's like a distrust of education. And what I want to say is, like, the Bible is a complicated book. It's not impossible to understand, but it helps to have somebody who's bothered to study it. It wasn't written in English. None of it was ever written in English. None of it was ever written by any human being who even knew that North America existed, that knew that Britain existed, right? The most they maybe heard of was somebody in Spain. When the Bible was written, Spain was as far and exotic a country as they could imagine. So this is an alien culture to us in lots of ways. And what it needs is an educated person to help us figure out, like, what did it feel like and what did it mean for the people who wrote these words to hear them for the first time. And there you need education in history, you need education in literature, original languages. And when you do that, it's really good. There's some great stuff in there. And great things you get is that in the New Testament, in the Bible, the end of the world is not the end of the world. You talked about meeting Liberians for whom it was the end of their world. Especially in the New Testament, like when Jesus talks about the end of the world. So in Mark 13 and 14, he talks about the end of the world. And in this famous book of Revelation, it's all about the end. Now, modern day uneducated people, not unintelligent, but uneducated people will think, oh, the end of the world means the end of existence. But if you go back and you sort of bother to actually pay attention to what did the earliest people who wrote those words think that it meant, what it actually means is the end of an era. It's that every generation is coming to an end, and there's always a new one waiting in the wings. And you'll notice that when in the New Testament it talks about the end of the world, that what they actually are meaning is the end of this current era. Your current age has come to an end, and a new age is coming. And all of the end of the world language in the Bible is always also accompanied with language about the beginning of something new. So Jesus will say, this current generation is like a woman in pain at childbirth. And it's the end of her world in some ways, but when she gives birth, it's the beginning of a new life as well. So her old life as a non-mother is over, and her new life as a mother is about to begin, and a new life is here, right? And Jesus said that's what the end of the world is like. The old is come, the old is gone, the new is come. And so a lot of this stuff is like, if you look at that, when you look at our world, every generation always has some sort of end.
Yeah.
And Jesus wasn't saying, watch out, the end of the world is coming and you're all going to burn in hell. It's really literally, watch out. When you think that the end of the world is coming, don't fear. Don't be afraid, because something new is coming. And something new is always coming. And so the earliest Christians, they read this end of the world stuff with hope.
Mm.
They saw it as gospel, as good news. Whereas now today, because we're, for various reasons, we read this stuff as fearful, as if it's the end of everything. And so I feel like, let somebody who's bothered to pay attention to these texts help you guide them through these texts. There's some really good stuff in there, but it's not the end of the world. It's the beginning of a new one.
Mm.
Yeah. Which is partly why I said, when the coronavirus definitely ended one part of my world.
Yeah.
But I'm not totally destroyed by it. I'm like, all right, what new thing is going to come in its place then? Because Jesus said, don't fear. Mm. When you hear about wars and rumors of wars, when it looks like the moon is turning to blood, when it looks like, the sky is falling, don't fear. So that's what I'm doing.
So what do you do if, so say, I'm watching a lot of YouTube and I stumble across this sermon over here that sounds really good, love it. I stumble across this sermon over here, this sounds great.
Yeah.
You start to listen to this, so you start to realize that it's Christianity, but slightly turned up. The volume's just slightly turned up. It's got some edge to it that isn't what you were hearing in your local church. How do you help somebody? What would be your wisdom to help somebody in discerning what they are consuming and listening to? And some of it is understanding the ecosystem of which that material is coming from.
Yeah. Well, all right. Again, we can use the New Testament itself to help us here, because Jesus. Now, this idea of like fearfully groups of people huddled together fearfully, scared of the outside world, is not a new invention. This was happening to Jesus' people within the New Testament. And what was happening, Jesus is then saying to them, and the earliest Christians who wrote the New Testament, the earliest founders of the church, what they're basically saying to these people is, look to the fruits of the Spirit. The fruits of the Spirit are your guide to truth. It's not military success. It's not financial success. It's not if people have lots of followers. It's not people who run empires or large organizations. Like, your measure of truth is not those things. It's, can you see love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, hospitality, right? Against these things, there's no law. And this was the measure. Or Jesus says the Beatitudes is like, are you merciful? Are you a peacemaker? Right? Do you mourn with those who are mourning? Are you humble? Are you like a child? The measure of goodness is very clear in the New Testament. And what I often see when I'm around people who set themselves up as Christian preachers, because anybody can set themselves up as a Christian preacher, by the way. Anybody can have a YouTube and open up the Bible and start preaching. That doesn't mean anything. So what you have to look at is, are they focused on the way of Jesus? Are they focused on fostering love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, gentleness? These are the measures of our goodness, of our truth. And it is not that hard for me to look at various YouTube preachers and see that what they're actually focused on. In fact, it's worth paying attention to how little Jesus even gets a look in. Self-proclaimed Christian preachers can talk for hours, and they will talk all about, the liberals and the Zionists and the end of the world and the Democrats and Donald Trump and coronavirus, they'll talk about everything except Jesus. And that's a clue. That's a clue. Are they really paying attention? And then if they do talk about Jesus, are they talking about the way of Jesus that we find in the Gospels? Are we talking about the guy that laid down his life for his friends? Are we talking about the one who said, consider others better than yourselves? Are we talking about the one who says, do not fear, for I am with you? Are we talking about the one who submits to violence rather than wage violence against his enemies, right? If they're not talking about that, then they're not actually talking about Jesus. And it doesn't matter if they call themselves a Christian, they're not Christian. So that's one of my measures, is that you use Jesus, the life of Jesus and his way and the fruits of his life as your measure, even against, or especially against, people who call themselves Christians. Like, that's when the conversation starts for me. That's not when it ends. If somebody says, I'm a Christian, I don't go, oh, right, okay, I'll believe everything you say. I go, oh, right, okay, so now you're using the holy name of Jesus Christ. So now the measure is high now. So I'm going to measure you. You said you're a Christian, so I'm going to now judge you against the way of Christ, because you've invited that into, you've asked me now to measure you against Jesus Christ. So my solution to some of these people is just go read the Gospels yourself. It's not rocket science. You know, what Jesus looks, sounds like, and feels like to be around it's not a mystery. And beware of people who claim that they have the secret knowledge or the secret mystery. And that only this is what a lot of conspiracy theories are based on. It's that, you know, only if the people are in the know, or if you've been taking the red pill and all that stuff, you know, only then will you know the truth. And that the thing about the Gospels is that it's not a secret. They're not trading in secrets at all. They just tell you plainly what's going on. And that's kind of part of the point. So one of the things I would say about this is that it doesn't mean you have to stop believing in evil. Now, I do believe in evil, that humans are evil, and that there is even forces of evil in the world. It's just that they're not hidden. And the weird thing about conspiracy theories, I find, is that they overcomplicate something. So they go, like the QAnon is a really classic example of this. So it totally presses your buttons because it's all about child abuse. It's about really horrific evils being done to helpless children at the hands of elites. Okay, that's what QAnon is all about. And then Donald Trump is meant to be the secret savior who's embedded himself with the elites, and eventually he's going to reveal all the evildoers, and he's going to release the children. This is the conspiracy theory. It's a pro-Trump conspiracy theory which literally demonizes left-wingers and Democrats. It says that Democrats are devil-worshipping baby eaters. I mean, you can't get much worse than that, okay? The problem about all this is that it uses the emotions that you feel when you rightly are horrified by child abuse. It actually abuses those emotions. I think QAnon is exploiting the suffering of children in order to make a political point. Because there really are children that are being exploited. And they really are problems. But QAnon isn't dealing with any of them. It's making up a fake child exploitation ring, which is run by Hillary Clinton and all this other nonsense, at the expense of actually pouring any energy at all into the real problems that we're facing. And you'll notice that anybody who's actually spent their life with dealing with child exploitation, go and look at NGOs, go and look at IJM, International Justice Mission, look at Tear Fund, look at Compassion, look at various organizations. They have nothing to do with QAnon because they're doing the real work. And in fact, they're so fed up with these groups because these groups are diverting resources and attention and energy away from dealing with the real evil, which is actually there for the sake of a fake evil, which they've invented. And so, this is what I would say from the Bible. It's like, we're not asking you to ignore the fact that there's real human suffering in the world and that there's real evil in the world. Yeah. We're just saying it's not secret. It's right there. Like, child exploitation happens because of the clothes that we wear, because your iPhones that you buy. Like there's actual real exploitation happening to real human beings. And the solution to those is to fix things like our spending habits and to increase governmental oversight. There's some actual solutions to these problems.
Yeah.
And it were to me that this whole conspiracy theory just diverts attention. And in fact, it creates people who make the real problems even worse.
Yeah.
Even worse.
I think that's really helpful. I think on Facebook, I come across Christians all over the country who've been watching stuff, seeing stuff. And I think one of the things that I keep saying is go back to your local church. What does your local church think about this?
Yeah.
It's easy to consume from out there and then demonize your local church because they don't get it.
Yes.
Actually, if the national church, if a church in every neighborhood is not on the same page as where you've got yourself to by consuming things on YouTube, just ask questions of yourself. And I just think it's really sad that there are those who've come to distrust their local church because of some things they've been watching online. That is the work of number one. To pull apart. The Lord very clearly says, where there's unity, I command a blessing. Yeah. This kind of thinking has created an environment where there is disunity. So go back to your local church. What does your local church think? And I think what you just said there about Tear Fund and some of the other NGOs, if these large organizations that have been doing ministry and work in the name of Jesus for years are saying, don't listen to this stuff, then really that is the wisdom to listen to. So thank you so much for that. We've run out of time completely. But I just think it's such an interesting conversation to have around how do we discern the truth and wisdom as Christians. Thank you so much for sharing just some of your thoughts on this stuff. I really appreciate it. It's great to get your take on how we as Christians engage with it. Because you could almost just walk away and say, well, you're a crazy person, get out of my life. And the last thing I'd probably say is this. I'm going to interview a member of my youth group from years ago, has now got a PhD in conspiracy theories.
No way. Wow.
And he, what he did as a part of his PhD was that he entered fully into the conspiracy theorist world. He went to all of the conferences, and he then came out to write his thesis on this stuff. And his wisdom on how to engage with somebody who's losing their mind on something is you can't argue against them. He says the only thing you can do is love them.
Yeah, right.
Love them. Which is exactly what he said about Jesus.
Right. I mean, being right is not one of the fruits of the Spirit. Winning an argument is not one of the fruits of the Spirit. This is not where our battleground is.
So as an example, I've got somebody who's within my world who, really believes the world is flat. Yeah. I've chosen not to argue. I've chosen to love them. Yeah. And one of the things I think that I've come to realize is isolation breeds fear. Yes. Yes. And it's in that fearful place that we believe things that we shouldn't necessarily believe. But when we're in unity, in relationship and love, where there isn't fear, then actually some of these strange theories actually start to just fall away. Yeah. So for me, it's love. Let's create relationship. Let's refine relationship and community post lockdown. Yeah. And let's the antidote to this stuff be love, which is what you're saying, fruit of the Spirit, love and peace with people. Stephen, thank you so much. Where can people listen to your podcast?
Yeah, I do a podcast. We talk about this stuff, actually. It's called Tent Theology. If you go to Tent Theology, you'll find it wherever you find podcasts. You can find the Tent Theology podcast, and we talk about Tent Theology is the organization I run, which brings theology into local churches or networks. And we have a podcast in which we discuss politics and life and information and all these things. And I'll have to get your PhD conspiracy theory on there. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. I'll hook you up. Stephen, thank you so much. Bless you. Thank you. I really appreciate you. God bless.
Go well, Chris. Bye.